About 3 years ago, I was working as a bartender at a sports bar in a college town, and one Saturday night I did something I still can't fully explain. It was the night of the playoff finals, the place stuffed wall to wall, bodies leaning too deep at the rail and pitchers sweating across the bar. Two sisters, Carol and Linda, sat with friends at my section, celebrating something, ordering rounds, and Carol was getting sloppy loud while Linda tried to keep peace. She kept swaying on her stool, tapping the bar with her nails, asking me to change the music even though the playlist came from the manager's office. I told her I didn't control it, offered to drop the local volume, tried to move on, but she started criticizing everything like a checklist she'd been saving. Drinks were weak, food was cold, service was slow. People nearby started staring, and the servers glanced over because they could hear that tone building. Linda mouthed sorry at me and asked for their check so they could leave, and I said sure, printed it, and set the folio with a pen. I thought that would be the end of it, honestly. Just another Saturday meltdown that exits with a rideshare and a hangover apology the next day. Instead, Carol looked at the total, flicked her card so it bounced off the rubber mat, and told me she wasn't paying for any of this garbage. I kept professional and said the items were served and the bill had to be settled, and if something was wrong I could comp the nachos or remake a dish. She asked for the owner, said she knew him from way back, which meant exactly nothing because he wasn't there, and the manager would back me anyway. The guys beside them edged their stools away, and Linda asked for 2 waters, whispering that they'd pay and go, but Carol kept poking the folio with the pen. I slid the receipt back and said, as calmly as I could, that payment wasn't optional, and I placed the pen on top and stepped a half pace back. She stood up so fast the stool skidded and clipped the heel of a woman behind her, who yelped, and a couple of people booed like it was a game. Carol leaned over the well, face shiny with sweat, lime and vodka on her breath, and said, "Say that again," while jabbing the paper as if she might tear it. I told her, slower, that she had to pay the bill, and she stared like I'd cursed her, then called me a name and spit, a wet spray that flecked my hand. Something in me just snapped. Not rage exactly, more like a bright click after hours of drunk nonsense, and my brain narrowed down to making the moment stop. I told her to back up and she didn't. She leaned farther like she might grab the folio, and Linda said her name. Linda tried to pull her away and got shrugged off, and in my head I suddenly saw Carol tipping over the well, face first into the speed rail, blood everywhere. Under the bar, in a blue milk crate for recycling, there was an empty tequila bottle I'd dropped earlier, and my hand just went for it. I grabbed it by the neck and raised it like a warning. The barback said my name. Everything felt distant, like hearing underwater. Without thinking, I smacked the bottle against the steel edge of the ice bin, like popping a stuck shaker, and the glass cracked clean. Pieces fell to the mat, and in my hand was the neck with a long crescent of jagged glass, and I heard the dip in noise when something bad happens. Linda's eyes went wide and she said my name, but Carol scoffed and pushed closer, like this was a test she was going to win. My arm moved before my brain, a clumsy swipe across the gap meant to make space, and she stepped into it, flinching hard, and the sharp glass caught her arm when she threw it up to protect herself. Blood sprayed across the bar. Carol screamed and clutched her forearm, and Linda's stool went over with that scrape that cuts through noise. I dropped the glass neck like it burned, and it bounced off the rubber mat and slid into the well. Linda was on her, pressing bar napkins and yelling at me to do something, yelling my name like I'd intentionally planned this. I grabbed a clean towel from under the sink and threw it across the rail because there was no time to run the long way around and the rail gate sticks anyway. A couple guys stood, half helping, half backing off, one of them already filming because of course he was, and the bouncer was pushing through with that look like he expected chairs flying. He got there fast and told everyone to move back, told Linda to keep pressure, told me to stay put. Carol kept shouting that I cut her on purpose, voice wobbling, and I said it was an accident, but it sounded thin even to me. My hands were shaking. My manager came out from the office, saw the blood on the mats and the broken glass, and just snapped, "Out. Now. Go to the back." And he pointed like I was a barback who missed a mop shift. I started to say I was trying to make space, and he cut me off and shouted for someone to call 911, like half the room hadn't already. Linda got Carol up and half dragged her toward the side door, the bouncer walking with them, pressed towel leaking through. I stared at the smear on the bar top, the receipt still there with the pen, the card half under the folio like everything paused on a single frame. People held phones up in that tilted way, not looking at me, looking at screens. I took off my apron because my manager said to get out, tossed it on the ice bin lid by reflex, and it slid to the floor. The dishwasher stared at me from the pit with his hands still in the gray water. I went out the back exit because it was closest, and also because my manager said cops were coming. I wasn't thinking clean, just moving. In the alley behind the dumpsters, the cold air hit me, and I stood there with my heart racing and glass grit in my shoes and sirens coming closer, not sure if running would make it worse or better. I walked to the far end of the lot to breathe and call my brother. No answer. Then the first cruiser rolled in hot. I didn't bolt. I wasn't going to make it anywhere. And if I ran, they'd chase me. And I had nowhere to go that didn't end back here. 2 officers got out and told me to keep my hands visible, which they were. And one asked if I was the bartender. I said yes, and they turned me around and cuffed me against the hood without drama. Just those practiced movements. The bouncer came around the corner at the same time pointing at me, and I heard the ambulance doors slam, and someone say, "Deep laceration," and "arterial maybe." And that word made my knees feel like water. They put me in the back of the car while my manager talked to another officer and kept gesturing at the door like the building could testify. At the ER, they took Carol in, and later I heard she got 16 stitches from wrist to elbow. At the station, they booked me, property bagged, fingerprints, the whole thing, and I kept repeating that I was trying to make distance, that I wasn't aiming. The charge sheet said aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and the phrase deadly weapon sat there like a joke, except it wasn't. They put me in a holding cell with a guy who smelled like weed and bleach, and I spent the night on a plastic bench while the clock refused to move. In the morning, my bail got set low enough that my brother could scrape it with a friend's help, and I walked out blinking, holding the paper with my court date. I hired a lawyer I could barely afford after the arraignment, then switched to a public defender because money is real, and we went through months of discovery, those videos from 3 angles, the manager's incident report, Linda's statement, all of it. Trial wasn't dramatic. It was a small courtroom with a tired judge and a prosecutor who stuck to the tape and the statute, and my attorney looked like he'd seen 1,000 versions of me. The jury didn't take long. I got probation, restitution, classes, community service, and a condition that I couldn't work anywhere that served alcohol, which ended the thing I was good at with one line on a form. I checked in, I did the hours, I paid what I could in monthly bites, and every job interview after that had a box I had to explain around, and then not get a call back. Sometimes I think she provoked the whole thing, that she wanted a fight, that she deserved to get checked. But that doesn't excuse what I did. I picked up the bottle, I made the swing, I cut someone because I couldn't take one more drunk customer on one bad night, and now I live with the weight of a line on her arm and a line on my record that both say the same thing about me. At 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the gym was supposed to open, I heard breathing coming from the women's locker room. Not the ventilation system, not pipes, but actual human breathing. quiet and uneven, like someone trying to stay silent but failing. I'd arrived an hour early that Tuesday to check a busted treadmill before the morning rush, and the basement-level gym was supposed to be completely empty except for me. The sound stopped me cold halfway to the administration desk. My mind immediately went to the complaints from the day before. The woman in the blue puffer jacket who'd been watching female members, taking photos on her phone. I'd watched her leave around 6:30 p.m., thought the problem was solved. Now, standing in the fluorescent silence of the empty gym, I realized she'd never left at all. The previous afternoon started normally enough. Around 6:20 p.m., one of our regulars, Professor Casildas, an elderly woman who came in religiously every day, stopped me near the entrance. She mentioned seeing a strange woman in a blue puffer jacket hanging around the women's showers, even though she wasn't working out. I said I'd keep an eye out. Figured maybe she was waiting on someone and lost track of time. It happens. 10 minutes later, Emma, a grad student who practically lived at the gym, came up to me looking uncomfortable, jacket half-zipped like she'd bailed mid-set. Same woman, she said, had been following her between machines and definitely took pictures of her on a phone. She pointed it right at me, Emma told me, voice low, then looked away like she was checking a text. That flipped a switch for me. I told Emma to stick with a friend on the track while I did a sweep because I wasn't going to let that slide. I walked the whole floor, ellipticals, free weights, the studio with the mirrored wall, then the hallway to the locker rooms. I paused at the women's sign, listened, felt wrong barging in unless someone asked, then called out through the door that staff were entering. No answer. I checked the lobby benches, the stairwell landing, even ducked into the supply closet by the vending machines where people sometimes hide to use the outlet. Nothing. By 6:30, the woman had vanished, and I figured she'd gotten the hint and left. I told Emma to report anything else, and I hung around up front until the rush thinned. I wrote an incident blurb for my boss, time, description, no contact, and set a reminder to review camera angles the next day. We closed at 10 p.m. I locked up like always, did my usual check of every room, every closet, every storage area. I rattled the back exit bar, checked the roll-up cage we keep the spin bikes in, peered behind the stacked mats. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. I killed the lights and headed out thinking it was just another campus creep we'd scared off. When I heard that breathing at 6:47 a.m., my whole body went rigid. I'd locked this place myself, checked every single room. That meant someone either stayed hidden during my check or got in afterward using a key only staff had. I stood still and listened to make sure it wasn't pipes kicking on, counted to 5, heard the same quiet pull of air, the tiny hitch at the end that didn't sound mechanical at all. The sound was coming from locker room 3, the far one that hardly anyone used because the shower stall lock was broken. I moved closer, keeping my footsteps soft, and heard fabric rustling, slow, careful, like someone shifting weight against tile. I kept the corner of my eye on the main door, because the last thing I wanted was to get funneled, and I slid my hand over the key ring clipped to my belt just to feel something solid in my grip. Then I saw it, just the edge of blue puffer jacket fabric sticking out from behind the metal lockers in the back corner. The same jacket from yesterday. It was low to the ground, like she was crouched, and there was a glint of a phone edge near the bench leg. I said, steady as I could, "Rec Center staff. You can come out. We need to talk." Not yelling, not stepping in, just placing my voice so it carried. No reply. The fabric twitched a fraction, like a breath moved it, and then went still again. My heart was hammering, but I forced myself to stay calm, to think clearly. This building has 2 exits on this level. Camera coverage is spotty in the locker rooms by policy, and the only people with keys are me, 2 other morning staffers, and maintenance. If she had a key or had been let in, that was a second problem for later. First problem was the person behind the lockers right now. I ran through options fast. If I backed off to call campus security, I'd lose eyes on her and she might bolt into the stairwell. If I went in, I'd be between rows of lockers with blind corners and no line to the exit. She was between me and the only exit from that locker room, and I had no idea if she was armed or what her mental state was. Running in there confronting her alone seemed like a terrible idea. I turned around and walked deliberately loudly toward my office on the opposite side of the gym, making it seem like I hadn't noticed anything. Once inside, I grabbed my phone and called campus security directly, not a text, because I needed them here immediately, and I needed confirmation they were coming. Marcus, the guard who patrolled the building next door, said he'd be there in 3 minutes with his partner Julia. I gave him the location, the blue puffer jacket detail, the broken lock shower in locker room 3, and the fact I had audible breathing. He told me to keep eyes on, but not engage. I left my office door cracked and angled my chair so I could see the hallway, and the entrance to locker room 3 reflected in the glass of the trophy case across from me. It let me watch without standing in the open. I focused on keeping my breathing quiet, which made it worse. Like when you think about blinking and suddenly you can't stop noticing it. The seconds crawled, my phone on the desk with the call screen still up so I could hit redial, and I ran through scenarios in my head. She runs, she hides, she has a weapon, she tries the stairwell. 2 minutes passed. A water pipe thunked in the wall behind the squat rack and I almost flinched. Then I heard it. The locker room door opening, rubber hinge squeaking, quick footsteps on tile. She came out fast, chin tucked, blue jacket bulked around her, and beelined across the main floor toward the emergency exit at the back by the stacked mats. I slipped out of my chair and ran out of my office and positioned myself between her and the exit, but kept my distance, didn't want to get too close and spook her into doing something wild. Up close, she was maybe 45, disheveled hair, hollow eyes, gripping her phone like a lifeline. She clocked me, then the door, then me again. "Security's already here," I said, keeping my voice level and calm, because if I sounded threatening she might swing or bolt. She froze for a second, the kind of pause where you could see the wheels turning. Then she pivoted hard and sprinted toward the main entrance instead, sneakers slapping. I stayed at an angle so I could cut off a side door if she tried it, not chasing so much as guiding, because straight pursuit just makes people run faster and do dumb things. Marcus and Julia appeared in the doorway right then, black polos, radios up. She tried to slip between them, shoulder down, but Marcus was faster, caught her arm and planted his feet. There was a brief struggle. She was yelling about protecting people and how we were letting predators hurt students. And then Julia got her other arm, and they steered her toward the stairs because the lobby had students trickling in and they needed space. She twisted and kicked at the risers, clipped Marcus's shin, and for a second he lost his grip and I thought she'd wrench free. But Julia used the railing for leverage and kept control. I kept pace behind in case she slipped them, calling out that the second-floor landing was clear. On the landing, she bucked again, slammed her shoulder into the wall, phone still clutched like she wouldn't drop it no matter what. Marcus pinned her wrists, Julia took the phone, and they cuffed her with the soft restraints campus security keeps for exactly this kind of thing. They caught her on the second-floor landing. Later, campus police told me she had severe mental health issues and had been obsessed with documenting male predators at the gym by hiding and secretly filming everyone. Her phone had hundreds of videos. She'd slept in the locker room twice the previous week, slipping in during open hours and staying after close by, tucking herself behind that broken stall panel. She'd learned our patterns from the mezzanine window and had probably tailed a student worker to copy a keypad code. They did a welfare hold and started contacting family. The university issued a no trespass order. We fixed the stall lock that afternoon, and maintenance replaced the keypad panel the next morning, and cameras on the approach to the locker rooms got bumped to full coverage. I still replay the choices in those minutes, walking loud like I hadn't seen her, keeping distance instead of trying to tackle her, saying security was already here to nudge her into a hallway with eyes on it. And I don't second-guess any of it because the point is, you don't make a small crisis bigger. You buy time, you keep lanes open, you call the people whose job is handling it. And the part that sticks with me more than the videos or the paperwork is that quiet, uneven breathing in the locker room and realizing she'd been there for hours, and I was 10 steps away, and neither of us knew what the other was going to do next. During the fall of last year, I was driving to show a country house to potential buyers. The property was 40 miles out of town, a 2-story cottage in a quiet subdivision near a lake. The meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. I left early to have time to prepare the house, air out the rooms, turn on lights, check everything was in order. The road went through several small towns. Traffic was calm. About halfway there, passing through a town called Maplewood, I saw an elderly man at a bus stop. He was standing with a cane, looked confused, and was waving at passing cars. I slowed down, lowered my window, and asked if he needed help. The man walked over, thanked me for stopping, and explained he had missed the bus that ran once an hour, and he urgently needed to get to a pharmacy in the next town. He had run out of blood pressure medication. His story sounded plausible, and honestly, he looked about 70, decently dressed, spoke politely, pressed shirt, good belt, not shaky or slurring. I checked the route on my phone. The pharmacy was on my way, only 10 minutes drive. My timeline had wiggle room, and I always figure you don't leave someone stranded when it costs you almost nothing. I unlocked the passenger door, kept the driver controls ready just in case, habit from city showings, and he got in the front seat, set the cane between his knees, thanked me again, and introduced himself as Mr. Carlton. We started driving. For the first few minutes he was quiet, looking out the window like he was trying to get his bearings. Then he started a conversation. He asked where I was headed. I said to work, to show a house. He nodded. Good weather for it, he said. And I agreed, because it was. Dry, not windy, no mud to track. Then he mentioned he used to live in a subdivision by a lake, the very one I was headed to. This surprised me a bit. I hadn't named the specific location, only said country house. But I thought maybe he just guessed, since there weren't that many subdivisions in that direction, and everyone says, by the lake, around here, when they mean outside the Beltway. We rolled past a feed store and an old service station with boarded windows, and he started describing the road to the lake, the long bend after the county line, an old church with a white steeple, a narrow bridge over a creek with rusted railings. Everything matched reality. I grew wary, not panic, just that feeling when a client knows more about a listing than they should. I get that sometimes with neighbors. He noticed my look and quickly added that he hadn't been there in a long time, 20 years ago, back when the roads were worse and you could fish off the dam before the HOA put up signs. I pressed my lips together and kept driving. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how my job works. I plan buffer time, I tell someone where I'm going, I keep calls hands-free, and I had already texted my office earlier, leaving for Lakeview 2 p.m. showing, so it's not like I was vanishing off the map. We approached the town where the pharmacy should be. I put my blinker on for the main drag and asked where exactly it was located. He hesitated, then said, very casual but too quick, "You know, I changed my mind. I actually don't need the pharmacy, but a bit further, on Oak Street, my nephew lives there. He'll drive me later." I knew that street. It wasn't a street, but a dirt road leading to abandoned warehouses on the outskirts, the kind of place where kids tag cement and roofing nails pop tires. No homes, no mailboxes. I felt my foot go a little softer on the gas. We hit a yellow light that turned red, and I stopped. I glanced at him. His hands were flat on his knees, the cane tilted, his eyes forward, not at me. I asked directly, "Oak Street?" "There are no residential houses there." He faltered just a beat, like a missed step, then insisted without looking over, "There is. House number 12. Please take me there. It's very close." I felt something was wrong, so I studied him again and saw a key ring with many keys while his cane lay forgotten on the floor. I asked if his nephew had a phone and why he could not call, but he ignored it and repeated the same Oak Street address. I said that house number 12 on Oak Street had been vacant 3 years, under back taxes, and I handled that property, so I knew. His face changed immediately. The polite mask dropped, his jaw tightened, and he snapped in a voice to take him there and stop asking questions. I kept my voice level, turned toward the police station a block away, parked at its entrance, put car in park, and switched on hazards. For a second he did not move, just stared at doors and the cruiser under awning while I kept my hands visible on the wheel. He inhaled through his nose, shoulders lifting, and said quietly that I did not understand and it had to be Oak Street and Oak Street. I shook my head and told him we were done. He could ask assistance inside if needed, because I was not driving to that road. He stared at the building like it offended him while Kane stayed by his shoes, and the keyring clicked softly when he tightened his grip. I said his nephew could meet him here. I unlocked the passenger door so he would not yank it and escalate anything next to me. 2 pedestrians walked by the entrance talking about lunch, normal voices, nothing dramatic, and that slice of public attention seemed to decide his next move. Mr. Carlton tensed and grabbed the handle, and I told him this was where he got out, and he looked at the building and me. He pushed the door open, stepped out fast, slammed it hard, and walked away without Kane, cut across the sidewalk, turned the corner, and disappeared. The cane stayed on the floor mat, so I locked the doors, picked it up, set the keys on it, and went inside the station. The duty officer listened carefully, asked for time, places, words used, and I gave height, clothes, approximate age, and the way he dropped the act. He wrote the description down and said there had been recent reports of scammers asking for rides and luring drivers to isolated places for robbery. He added that warehouses had been a problem, sometimes with a second person waiting out of view, and that cameras here made my choice one. I signed the incident form, left the cane and keys on the counter, asked if anything else was needed, and he said they would patrol. I realized how close it had been, picturing angles of a car on a dirt turnout, corners, and how a phone can vanish during struggles. I thanked the officers, stepped outside, sat a moment, texted my office that I was fine after a delay, and headed for Lake on schedule. 20 minutes later, I reached the cottage, keyed the lockbox, turned on lights, opened blinds that mattered, and met the clients at 2 as planned. They walked through rooms, asked about the HOA, the dock permits, recent roof work, and I answered plainly, keeping everything professional, not offering personal details. Even while talking about disclosures, my mind replayed the light turning red, the keys clicking, his switch in tone, and that line about Oak Street. Now I never pick up hitchhikers, no matter how harmless they seem, because one wrong turn to a road became the worst mistake of job. The woman in the medical scrubs wouldn't leave our car. She kept leaning against the driver's window, smiling too wide, insisting we needed help even though we said no 3 times already. That happened 3 weeks ago, and I still check my rearview mirror obsessively when I'm at gas stations. My roommate Emily and I were driving back from our overnight pharmacy shift around 3 a.m., taking the route through the industrial district because it shaved off 10 minutes. The low fuel light came on right as we passed the last residential area. The nearest station was at a highway exit surrounded by warehouses and abandoned buildings. When we pulled in, 2 vehicles were already there. One at the pump, another parked at the edge of the lot where the lights barely reached. I got out to pump gas while Emily stayed in the car scrolling through her phone. The air felt flat and empty. The only sounds were the pump ticking and some distant highway hiss. I remember telling myself to be quick. No snacks, no bathroom, just gas. Because there was this off vibe you get when everything's silent, but it shouldn't be, you know? I had just started filling the tank when a woman emerged from the car at the lot's edge. She was maybe 40, wearing medical scrubs like she'd just finished a hospital shift. She walked straight toward me with this unnaturally wide smile and asked if we could give her a ride to the nearest hospital. Her car had broken down, she said. I apologized and told her we were in a hurry, but she didn't move away. Instead, she stepped closer, positioning herself between me and the driver's door. She kept talking about how dangerous it was for young girls to be alone at night. Her voice had this strange mechanical quality, like she was reading from a script. I glanced at the car she'd come from. The headlights were on, engine running. Nothing about it looked broken. That tiny detail lodged in my head like a splinter. "We can call you a tow," I said. I didn't have a tow number, but saying it felt safer than arguing. She shook her head too fast and kept the smile. The pump numbers crept upward, and I could feel my shoulders tensing even though I was trying to look calm. "Please, it's just 10 minutes, she said, and she shifted again so my path to the driver's door was blocked even more. I could smell gas and cold air and the cloying floral scent from her scrub top, like the new kind of fabric softener, too strong. "My husband's on a night rotation. I just need to get there," she added, which didn't match the running car or the empty lot, and I caught myself wondering why she'd park in the darkest corner if she needed help. I did a quick scan. The station kiosk was closed. No cashier, no other customers, just that one car at the pump with a guy inside, head down. I said, "We can't, I'm sorry," louder this time. I took half a step back to angle around her, and she mirrored it. Same half step, same angle. My heart kicked. It was subtle, but it felt like a drill she'd practiced. Emily noticed the woman through the window, and I saw her hand move toward her purse where she kept pepper spray. The woman leaned against my door now, peering into the car at Emily like she was checking stock on a shelf. "At least wait with me," she suggested, soft but firm. "Just until my tow truck gets here." The way she said it felt wrong, like she was trying to keep us there. "We already called a mechanic friend," I said. Lie number 2. "And everything's fine." That made her eyes flick, just a blink, and she finally took a step back but stayed close, watching. The pump clicked. Tank full. I pulled out the nozzle faster than I ever have, not bothering to top it off. My hands were shaking just a little, and I told myself to breathe, to keep it normal, to move deliberately. I put the cap on, slammed the fuel door, and that's when I saw movement from the second car. A man got out and started walking in our direction at a slow, deliberate pace. He wasn't looking at the store or the road. He was looking at us. "Get in," Emily said through the glass, tight, clipped, and I nodded, keeping my voice even. "Have a good night." The woman didn't answer. She shifted her stance so if I opened the door fast, I'd hit her. I didn't open it. I circled the hood instead. Short path, more exposed, but it gave me space, and she followed 2 steps, then stopped, calculating. The man's shoes scuffed on the concrete. Heavy soles, steady rhythm, not rushing, like he knew we weren't going anywhere. I reached the passenger side and Emily popped the locks. "Seatbelt," she said, and I slid in, dropped the pump receipt on the floor, and hit the door lock. My pulse was so loud it made the car feel small. The woman tapped the window with one knuckle, light, polite, and smiled again. "You shouldn't drive off with your hood open," she said. Our hood wasn't open. Emily didn't even look at her. She started the engine and the dash lit up. I put my hand on her forearm, tiny pressure. Wait, just wait a second. Because the man was now halfway between his car and ours, and if we gunned it and misjudged the turn, we'd clip the pump island or stall. Worst case. "Reverse, then swing wide," I whispered, and she nodded. The woman's smile thinned. "Tow's almost here," she murmured, like a reminder. I glanced at the mirrors. No headlights turning in, no diesel rumble, nothing. The man kept coming, hands down at his sides, hood up, no phone, no keys visible, just that steady, deliberate walk toward our front bumper. I didn't wait to see what he wanted. I yanked the nozzle from the tank, shoved it back into the pump, and jumped into the car. Emily was already turned around in her seat, eyes wide, watching both people now. I started the engine and hit the gas, tires squealing slightly as we pulled out. In the rearview mirror, I watched both of them, the woman and the man, turn and head back to their vehicles simultaneously, like they'd rehearsed it. Neither of them looked at the gas pumps. Neither of them did anything that suggested a normal reason for being there at 3 in the morning. Both cars pulled out of the lot right after we left. "Left or right?" Emily asked, and I said right, toward the warehouses, because it gave us more options and fewer lights to get stuck at. We hit the first intersection, and I rolled a rolling stop, I know bad, just to get distance. I checked the mirrors and saw 2 pairs of headlights drift to the exit ramp behind us, not speeding, just there. And my stomach did that drop because it felt like a tail, even if it wasn't technically one. At the next block, I cut down a service road by a chain-link fence and took an immediate right behind a shuttered loading dock. Emily whispered, "They coming?" And I said, "Maybe," because I didn't want her to panic, and also because the lights had vanished behind a berm and I couldn't confirm anything. I did a quick circle around a dumpster, tight turn, almost clipped it, and came out a different driveway onto the frontage road. "Okay, 2 more turns," I said, mostly to keep my brain steady. We passed a burned-out streetlight and I killed my brights for a second to see if anything adjusted behind us. Nothing obvious. We rolled past a row of closed roll-up doors with painted numbers, and I took a left onto a connector that paralleled the highway for a bit. I kept it under the limit because a ticket would ruin everything. Emily had the pepper spray out with the cap off, tucked against her thigh, and her phone open to the keypad. She kept saying, "Tell me if I should call." And I kept saying, "Not yet." A mile later, I took a clover leaf and then exited halfway through to re-enter going the opposite direction. Dumb little trick my uncle taught me when I started driving downtown at night, and then immediately ducked off onto a side road that fed a self-storage place. No headlights followed into the curve. I took another right, then a left past a row of blue doors, then eased to a stop sign where a camera pointed at the gate. I counted to 5 out loud. Nothing. We pulled back onto the main and headed toward the residential cut-through, which put a few actual houses between us and the warehouses. The mirrors stayed empty except for one delivery van way back. Emily finally exhaled hard and said, "If they're following, they're bad at it." I nodded and said, "We're not going home." And she agreed. We drove to a grocery store on the far side of town that stayed open all night and parked beside a cart corral with a clear view of the road. I backed into the spot, habit, left the engine running, and we watched for 2 minutes, just in case. No one pulled in. No scrubs, no hooded guy. We texted our manager that we'd be late in the morning because car trouble, close enough. Then left again and took a different route to Emily's cousin's apartment, where we crashed on the couch until sunrise. For the next 5 miles, Emily gripped her pepper spray, and I kept checking the mirrors, making random turns until we were sure no one was following. We reported it to the police the next day, but they said without license plates or proof of intent, there wasn't much they could do. The officer mentioned there had been other reports of suspicious activity at that exit. People working in pairs, approaching lone drivers, especially women. They suspected robbery attempts, maybe worse. Emily hasn't worked a night shift since then. She switched to mornings and takes a different route home. I still work nights sometimes, but I never stop at that exit anymore. I drive an extra 20 minutes to a well-lit station near a police precinct. What scares me most is how normal they looked. Just a tired nurse needing help. Just some guy getting gas. If I'd been alone, if I'd been more trusting, if I'd hesitated even 30 seconds longer, I don't know what would have happened. Sometimes I wonder if they're still there, waiting for someone less paranoid than me. During the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I picked up night shifts at a 24-hour gas station on the edge of town because they paid $3 more per hour. The store was small, 6 aisles with chips and soda and lottery cards, and from 2 to 6 a.m., it was usually dead. My manager Rob stayed with me until 1. Then he'd head home and I'd cover the rest. I didn't worry much. Cameras, a panic button, and a door I could lock from inside. That night was nothing special. After Rob left, 3 quick customers rolled through for gas and burnt coffee, and I straightened shelves and price tags. Around 3, I was walking the aisles with the sticker gun when the entry chime beeped. I stepped back to the counter and saw 2 guys about 25 in hoodies, caps low. They moved slow to the coolers. Nothing screamed trouble, but the unhurried way they drifted bugged me. They grabbed 2 energy drinks, paid cash, and left. They sat in a dark sedan at pump 4 and kept the engine running. 10 minutes went by. The sedan idled and bugged me, but I told myself it was nothing and went back to the cigarette wall. The chime hit again. I looked up and nobody was there. "Welcome?" I called. No answer. I did a quick lap down the center, peeking each aisle. Empty. The stockroom door was still locked. Back at the counter, I glanced out and saw the sedan was gone. 5 minutes later, passing the restroom, I saw light under the door. I knocked. No reply. I opened the camera app to check feeds. On the exterior timeline, the 2 guys split. One went to the sedan like I'd seen, the other rounded the corner and dropped out of view. I flipped to the interior dome. 2 minutes after I turned to the cigarette wall, he slipped back in through the front, straight to the restroom, door closed. He sat there while I walked around thinking I was alone. 15 meters and a door between us. I pressed the panic button under the register, pinging dispatch and Rob, then hit the switch that locks the front door. I keyed the service door and stepped onto the concrete pad by the dumpsters. My phone buzzed. Rob. Police en route. Leave now. Then, do not go back inside. I moved along the wall, crossed to the diner next door, closed but bright, and stood under the halogens where our exterior cam could see me. From there I could watch the windows, the counter, and the restroom door by the coolers. I stayed behind a concrete trash can and kept the feed open on my phone. The door didn't move. Another buzz from Rob. Stay put. Officers close, I typed, at diner lights, and kept my eyes on the windows. A pickup hissed by and I almost waved it down, then pictured leaving my sightline and stopped. If he came out fast, I wanted a straight path away, not a chat with a stranger. Behind the building, a compressor kicked and banged, loud enough that I saw a shadow break under the restroom door. The bathroom door opened. He stepped out slow, scanning the counter and the entry. He pulled on the glass door twice, then hit it with his shoulder. The lock held. He looked up at the dome camera, then back along the aisles like he was weighing whether to jump the counter. For a second I thought he'd go for cash, but he didn't even look at the till. He moved past the lottery rack to the side hall, checked the side door, came back, glanced at the pumps, then turned again, restless. He made his choice. He cut left, hugged the cooler row, slipped out of the interior camera's view, and I picked him up on the exterior side feed, sprinting along the cinder block wall. He vaulted the curb at the back corner and ran hard for the trees behind the station. He didn't look back. He reached the tree line, jumped the shallow ditch, and disappeared into the dark. The cops rolled in 7 minutes later, 2 cruisers and a third a minute behind, lights but no sirens, and they fanned out with flashlights to the back lot and the tree line, while one came to me and asked if anyone else was inside. I said no, and pointed to the locked door and the restroom. They cleared the store fast, called restroom clear, then went into the brush with a K9 from the third car, and I watched their beams move deeper until they vanished. Nothing. He beat them to the trees and was gone. When they checked the drawer and the drop safe with me, everything was there. Bills under the clips, rolled quarters, even lottery scratchers, which was the weirdest part because people who grabbed those grabbed them messy, and he hadn't touched anything. The older officer said it was probably a planned stick-up he abandoned when I didn't leave the counter long enough. Or he was waiting for the 6 a.m. drop to the big safe, which is what we did before day shift, and I felt my stomach go tight because, yeah, that made sense. Rob pulled up about 20 minutes after my first text, white as paper, keys in his fist, asking, "You okay? You okay?" and apologizing for leaving me, which is the procedure, but still, he felt lousy. We stood with the officers at the register and rolled the footage on the back office desktop. Hood up, bill low, chin and part of cheek, that was it. No tattoos, no obvious limp, nothing to hook into. They tried to pull a plate off the sedan, but the angle and glare killed it. Just a dark blob and the reflection of the pump numbers. "We'll patrol the area the next few nights," the older officer said, writing. "But he knew what he was doing, and you did too. You hit the button, you locked the door, you changed the situation." I gave my statement, spelled my name twice, signed 2 forms, initialed a timestamp. Before he left, he nodded at the restroom and said, "You caught the light under the door." That's what saved this from turning into something worse. Rob asked me to sit in the office while he wiped down the counter and put the closed sign up for an hour, even though we're 24/7, just to keep people out while police finished. He kept saying, "I'm getting you days. I don't care about payroll." I told him, "I'm fine." I wasn't, but fine enough to stand and answer questions. And I kept replaying that stupid little gap where I looked at cigarettes and he slipped past, like 2 minutes is nothing, right? But it was everything. Rob offered me day shifts the next morning, and I said yes right away, even though it cut $3 an hour. Some things aren't worth $3, like being 15 meters from a closed door with a maybe robber listening to you breathe. I still didn't know what he wanted, and that bothered me more than the chase. If it was straight robbery, he could have tried the till when he came out, or grabbed smokes or lottery. But he didn't. So either he lost his nerve when the door was locked, or he was timing the 6 a.m. drop, and I screwed it up by leaving. I kept running it in my head. If I hadn't opened the camera app, if I just kept facing the cigarette wall, would I have heard the door? Would he have come up behind me? Or he'd wait until I rolled the safe key, 'cause that's when your hands are full and your back is turned, and people know routines. They learn them just by sitting in cars outside. Rob installed 2 more cameras that week, one aimed straight at the restroom door, and one at the back corner where the trees start. And he hired a second night person so nobody worked alone. He also moved the panic button to a more obvious spot and taped a handwritten "lock door when alone" note under the counter shelf. We ran a quick drill during a midday lull, me locking the door, him watching the feed, and he said, "This is the new normal. I don't care what corporate says." I did 2 more months on days, covering register and stocking, easy and kind of boring, which was the goal. And then I got a campus job at the library circulation desk that paid less, but meant I walked home at 9 p.m. instead of 7 a.m., with birds screaming and my nerves cooked. I don't have some tidy lesson from it. I just changed how I move. I stand where cameras can see me. I answer with short sentences. I don't chase shoplifters. I don't argue over pennies. I don't pretend a weird feeling is nothing. And every time I step into a 24-hour place at night, even just for gum or a drink, I catch myself glancing down, checking for that thin line of light under the bathroom door. This happened during my sophomore year at State College. Campus had like 18,000 students and I was renting an apartment off campus with my roommate Lauren. Cheap carpet, thin walls, a locking mailbox cluster by the leasing office that was always jammed. One evening after a late lab, I checked the mail and found this postcard with no return address. Just a few words. "I like your smile. Hope to see more. B." The handwriting looked feminine and neat, like bubble letters a teacher might have. And I figured it was a mix-up or some weird flirting attempt. Laughed to myself, tossed it on the junk pile with pizza coupons. 3 days later, another one slid in. "You looked beautiful in that blue sweater yesterday." I was nearby. B. I had worn a blue sweater to psych lecture, and then to the grocery store after, so that hit wrong, like someone was behind me and I hadn't noticed. I showed it to Lauren and she squinted at it like it was a puzzle and said, maybe it was someone we knew joking around. I tried thinking of anyone with a name starting with B, Becca, Brielle, Ben from Stats, but I came up blank, and it didn't feel like a joke anyway. Next week, another postcard showed up with specifics that made my stomach go tight. "I saw you eating a sandwich in the library 3rd floor. You sat by the window. I was 2 rows away from you. B. That day I'd been cramming for bio and I did sit by the window because the outlets over there actually worked. I looked around the whole 3rd floor in my head trying to remember faces and came up with a blur of hoodies and laptops. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how campus security works. They're nice, but if there's no threat and no law broken, they basically take a report and hand you a pamphlet. I went in anyway, handed over the postcards, and the officer, older guy, very polite, said to stay alert. Don't walk alone at night. Report suspicious behavior. No cameras in the library stacks, he mentioned, and I nodded like that helped. I started scanning reflections in windows, half watching phone cameras as I passed by them, paying attention to footsteps behind me. Normal errands got tense. Laundry room? I'd prop the door and text Lauren. Grocery store across the street? I went at noon when it was busy. For 2 weeks, nothing else came, and I told myself maybe I'd overreacted. Then the quiet broke in a way that was somehow worse than the postcards. I got an email to my student address. No subject, no body, just an image attachment of my front door from the hallway, slightly tilted like whoever took it had their phone low. Our building had indoor halls and only residents could get past the main entry, so my brain started running through who could have held the door for who. I forwarded it to security, and they replied asking if I'd shared my location publicly. I hadn't. That night I slid our deadbolt twice and wedged a chair under the knob even though I knew it was dumb. I went down a list of B's again, this time with last names from classes, and nothing fit. I told Lauren we needed to start leaving and arriving together when we could, and she agreed. No pushback, 'cause honestly the email freaked her out too. The postcard stopped for 2 weeks, and I really did think maybe it had burned out. Like whoever it was got bored. I was careful, but I let my shoulders drop a little. I kept the shoebox with the postcards and printed the email for a folder, because the officer said to keep everything. I started relaxing, like not totally, but enough that I studied on the 3rd floor again, sat by a different window, and pretended that normal was coming back. That was the week my lab partner asked if I was okay because I'd been jumpy, and I joked I was mainlining coffee and paranoia like every other sophomore in midterms. He laughed, and it made me feel stupid for a second. Then I saw a girl on the 2nd floor looking at me and looking away when I glanced up, and I told myself I was seeing things. Then one night around 9, Lauren was in class, and I was home alone when someone knocked. It wasn't loud, just 2 taps. I looked through the peephole and saw a girl about my age standing there with a small tote bag, neutral face, jeans, a jacket, dark shoulder-length hair, nothing that screamed danger. I put the chain on and cracked the door like 3 inches. "Yeah?" I said. She smiled like we were already friendly and said, "Hi, I'm Brianna. We're kind of acquainted through mutual friends. Can I come in?" That name hit me like a ping. But I didn't know any Brianna, not really. And there was no way I was letting a stranger inside after the mail stuff. I kept my foot behind the door and said, "I'm in the middle of something, sorry. Maybe we can meet on campus?" She tilted her head, like she was trying to place me better, and said she thought we had a class overlap, or maybe a party last semester. It was quick. I told her I don't go to parties, true, and said if she wanted to talk we could meet at the cafe downstairs tomorrow. Lots of people around. She didn't push, just did this disappointed little breath through her nose, glanced past me into the apartment like she could see anything, then nodded. "Okay," she said, soft, like I'd hurt her feelings over nothing. She turned away and walked down the hall at a normal pace, not fast, not slow, tote bag bumping her hip. I watched through the peephole until she hit the stairwell and the door closed. I slid the chain off, stood there with my hand on the knob, and listened for footsteps coming back. After she was gone, I felt more confused than anything. Never got postcards after that and never saw Brianna again, which should have felt like relief, but mostly made me second-guess whether I'd imagined parts of it, like maybe B was from a classmate who moved on or whatever, but I still checked every time the mail slot clacked. I tried searching for her in the college student system by name, the portal where you can look up emails for group projects, and there were 3 Briannas, but none matched the girl at my door. Wrong majors, different hair in their photos. One was a grad student who looked 30. I went through my social media too, clicked mutuals, scrolled friends lists of people from psych and lab. Nothing. No face that matched, which was its own kind of weird. 'Cause if she was here, she had to be on someone's phone somewhere, right? I told Lauren about the visit in full. The exact words, the bag, the way she tried to look past the chain, and Lauren didn't minimize it or anything. She said we should install a doorbell camera, so we bought a cheap one on sale, stuck it above the peephole, synced it to both our phones, and that actually made sleeping easier. The next months were quiet, like boringly quiet. No knocks, no messages, no emails with creepy angles of our door. And by the end of the semester, I had almost let the whole thing slide into that mental drawer where you keep dumb college stories you don't tell your parents. Then one day in the campus cafeteria with Lauren, noon rush, trays clattering, the card readers beeping, I spotted a familiar figure by the entrance, like a cutout in the doorway, and my brain took a second to match it. Then it clicked. Same girl, Brianna, standing at the doors staring straight at me like she'd been waiting for me to look up. When our eyes met, she flinched, not scared exactly, more like caught, and she quickly turned and walked out. I said, "That's her," way too loud, scraped my chair back, and ran after her. Which I know sounds dramatic, but I wasn't gonna sit there and lose her again. I hit the exit, and the bright outside made my eyes water for a second, and there were just waves of students moving in all directions, backpacks and hoodies and headphones, and she was gone, like melted into the flow. I jogged to the corner, checked both ways, even stepped into the bike lane like an idiot while a guy yelled at me, but there was nothing that looked like her. When I came back inside, out of breath and useless, Lauren held up her phone and said she got a shot. Not great, but something. A blurry photo of the girl through the cafeteria window, face slightly turned, hair catching the light, jacket collar up. We stared at it together, pinch zoomed, argued about whether that mole was a shadow or a pixel, and I saved it twice in 2 different folders because I wasn't losing proof again. We took the photo to campus security this time, walked straight into the same small office with the blue carpet and the poster about bike locks, and I said, "This is the girl who's been contacting me. She was here today. Can we do anything with this?" The officer on duty looked, compared it to my ID photo like that mattered, and said that without her doing anything illegal, no trespass, no explicit threat, just standing in public, they couldn't act. He did the thing where he took down the details anyway, asked dates, times, had me write a statement, promised to keep an eye out in the dining halls and the library, maybe ask patrol to look for her if they had downtime. We left with a case number that felt like a receipt for a return that wasn't processed. Nothing came of it. I never saw Brianna again or got more postcards. By graduation, I still had no idea who she was or what she wanted, and I boxed the photo printouts with my notes from bio and taped it all shut like I was packing a strange elective I'd failed. Sometimes I think I see her in crowds around town, at the bus stop, in the cereal aisle, and my stomach does that drop. But when I look closer, it's someone else with similar hair or a jacket that hits the same way. The whole thing left me with this unfinished feeling and this constant wariness, not panic, just edges. I thought about someone watching me for months, knowing my schedule and habits, and it still makes me adjust, like I changed a lot of my routines, stopped posting locations on social, scrubbed my class schedule from my bio, and I always check my surroundings in public now, not paranoid, just careful. The postcards are in a box somewhere in my closet, the cheap cardstock and neat letters like evidence of something I'll never understand. And I still ask why me? Why the surveillance? Why show up at my door? What was the end game? Maybe Brianna had some obsession she eventually moved past. Or maybe she's doing the same thing to someone else now, and I'll probably never know, and that uncertainty is its own kind of haunting. During the summer of 2013, I was traveling for work constantly, doing IT consulting all over the country. I'm a short woman, 5'3", but I'd been doing this job for years and felt pretty confident handling myself in unfamiliar cities. This particular trip was to Salt Lake City, and after a week of restaurant food, I was desperate for something healthier. Thursday evening, I stopped at this big sporting goods store near my hotel to grab some protein bars and nuts. Nothing unusual about that. What happened next made me reconsider how alert I actually was. Right at the entrance to the nutrition section, this guy in a store uniform approached me way too aggressively, trying to sell me a discount card. He launched into a script before I even said hi, stepping into my path so I had to stop or shoulder him. I did the polite smile and said, "No thanks, I'm good." But he inched closer like we were haggling and started rattling off benefits. 10% off, coupons, a free bottle if I signed up now, his voice climbing a notch with each bullet. I edged toward the bars and he mirrored me, blocking the shelf with his body. "It only takes a minute, ma'am," he said louder when I tried to ignore him. People looked. I hate scenes, but I finally said, "Please leave me alone," clear enough that it carried. He backed off 2 steps with that tight customer service grin and drifted behind a display. But he kept watching, peeking between hanging shaker bottles like I was an unpaid item in his cart. I grabbed what I needed and kept moving, basket hooked over my arm, pretending to compare labels. I detoured to beverages because I didn't want to pass him again. That's when I noticed her. A really tall teenage girl, 6 feet or more, rail thin in a baggy gray hoodie. No basket, no cart. She looked lost, glancing around with this pinched expression, then followed when I turned down the next aisle. At first, I told myself we were just orbiting the same shelves, but when I stopped at jerky, moved to trail mix, and she stopped and moved with me without touching a single product, something clicked wrong. I tried a basic test. I crossed 2 aisles over to camping fuel I didn't need, and she appeared 3 seconds later, stopping too close. Her hood shadowed half her face, and she kept pressing her lips together like she was rehearsing a line. The uniform guy popped back into view near an end cap, pretending to straighten price tags while watching me in a reflection. That sliding feeling hit, the one where you realize you've become the only thing happening to certain people in the room, and none of it is good. I wasn't going to panic. I was going to adjust. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how I travel, carry-on only, crossbody bag clipped, keychain pepper spray that's legal, and I always clock the exits. I swapped my basket to my left so my right was free and cut diagonally across apparel to see if she'd take the same line. She did. No browsing, just that steady drift. I caught a glance of her hands jammed deep in the hoodie pocket, knuckles pale. She looked too young to be out working a scam, but too deliberate to be aimless. The employee kept his orbit, close enough to intercept if I headed for the doors. I put a fleece rack between me and the girl and walked fast toward the front, then cut left into shoes. I stopped at a wall of sneakers and bent like I was checking sizes, watching the mirror strip above the aisle. She stopped too, 5 feet away, not facing shoes, only me. The exit was too far across open floor and she was younger, taller, definitely faster if I tried to run. Security was a better bet. Employee areas meant cameras and co-workers who could interrupt whatever this was. I eased out of shoes toward the side hallway with the restrooms sign and a gray door that said, "Staff only." As I moved, she moved. When I sped up, she picked up speed. The hallway air changed. Rubber and cardboard. The dead sound of storage. The staff door had a push bar and a red sign about alarms. I didn't want to set anything off. I wanted proximity to people who could help. I stopped short and pivoted toward the service desk. That's when she closed the distance, quiet as a shadow, stopping close enough that I could see a small rip at her sleeve cuff and a yellowing bruise under her jaw. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice normal. "You okay?" She didn't answer. She swayed a little like she'd been standing too long and said very quietly, "Do you want the card?" "What card?" I asked, already not liking where this was going. Her eyes flicked past me toward the sales floor. A shoe squeaked around the corner, rubber on tile, that little chirp you only notice when you're listening for anything. I eased a step sideways to open a lane and kept my right hand free. "I don't need any card," I said. "I'm just checking out." She swallowed and didn't move. The squeak came again, closer, and I pictured the uniform guy turning into this hallway. Boxed in between 2 strangers inside a dead-end corridor was not happening. I cut right, fast, toward the staff door, not to open it, just to put space between us so I could swing around her back to the floor and straight to customer service, or 911 if I had to. I turned toward a door marked "Staff Only," but it was empty when I got there. When I spun around, the tall girl was standing less than 3 feet from me, swaying slightly and staring off to the side. I backed up and asked loudly, "Can I help you?" She didn't answer, just kept that tiny rocking, eyes not quite on me, like she was waiting for a cue. Her hands were still buried in the hoodie pocket, and I couldn't tell if that was good or bad, so I put my left shoulder to the wall to keep space and said, "You need something?" A little slower because sometimes that helps. She blinked, and then there was fast shoe noise from the floor, hurried steps, rubber squeak, and this frantic-looking middle-aged guy came whipping around the corner from electronics, head up, scanning like he'd lost his keys, except it was a person. He saw her and his whole body kind of dropped, like someone let the air out of him. "Carrie," he said, breathless, not angry, just relieved. "I asked you not to wander off." He stepped in quick, hands visible, not touching her yet, eyes cutting to me with this grimace that read sorry in any language. The girl turned to him, calm again like the switch flipped, and said quietly, "Dad, I found the lady with the blue jacket." He nodded like, "Yep, that tracks." Then to me, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." We were over by headlamps and I looked away to ask a question and she just... hand gesture. Gone. "She's autistic," he said, steadying his tone. "Sometimes she fixates. Follows people wearing certain colors because it calms her. Today it's blue." He motioned at my windbreaker. "I lost sight of her for 5 minutes and she locked onto you. She isn't trying to scare you." He kept his voice low but clear, like he'd done this speech before, and he angled his body between us without making it weird. "Carrie," he said, "remember what we talked about?" She nodded once. "No following," she said, soft. I exhaled a little but stayed planted because I didn't want to spook anyone or get too casual in case this was something else. The uniformed guy appeared at the hall entrance, that same fake neutral face on, and when he clocked the dad and the girl and me, he stalled out. "Everything okay back here?" he asked, flattened tone, like he already knew the answer, but had to ask. The dad said, "We're fine, thanks," with that practiced grocery store dad smile, and the employee pivoted away fast, suddenly interested in a sign holder. The dad looked back at me. "I should have grabbed her hand," he said, half to me, half to himself. "She's taller than me now and quicker. I'm working on it." He lifted his palm a little. "Again, sorry. I get how that looked." "It's okay," I said, because my voice finally had somewhere to land. I stopped, not sure what explanation didn't make me sound like a jerk. "She didn't touch me," I added. The girl was staring at my sleeve again like it was a TV aquarium. "Blue," she said, barely there. I tugged my cuff down, more to break the line of sight than anything, and try to smile at her. "I'm Diana," I said. She didn't answer, but she wasn't rocking now. The dad squeezed her hand gently. "We're heading out," he said, more to her than to me. "We're gonna get the thing for the tent, and then we're going home." She echoed home, almost like it was a safe password that reset the level. He looked at me one more time, waiting to see if I needed a manager or wanted to keep talking, and I shook my head. "We're good," I said. "Really." He thanked me again, twice, and guided her back toward the floor with small steps, keeping his hand light so she could opt in but not bolt, and they moved away, turning at the end of the hall into the brighter aisle. All the tension I'd been holding, all the adrenaline I'd built for a confrontation, just dumped out of my limbs at once and left me feeling stupid in that immediate, hot way. But I kept it together because I still had to finish the errand, and I wasn't going to make this weirder. I waited 10 seconds, then walked straight to customer service where there were people, paid for my stuff without looking around much, and headed out. In the parking lot, I spotted them by a silver minivan, the dad opening the passenger door first, checking the seatbelt twice, not in a fussy way, just habit. And Carrie glanced back at me over the roof and gave me this small, brief smile that made my face do a complicated thing I didn't want to unpack in a parking lot. I sat in my rental, locked the doors out of reflex, and stared at the blue on my sleeve, thinking about how fast I'd built a whole threat map around a teenager who stood too close, and how the only actually aggressive person in that store had been the upsell guy with a badge and a pitch. I left, and I never went back. Not because of fear, just because the embarrassment latched to that building, and the thing I keep from it is dumb simple. Not everything strange is dangerous, and sometimes your heart is just filling in blanks with bad data. About 3 years ago, I moved into a small condo on the 4th floor after my divorce. I was looking for something quiet and predictable, a place where nobody asked me how I was holding up, and I didn't have to explain 30 years collapsing into lawyers and spreadsheets and that hollow feeling you get when you walk into an empty kitchen. The building was solid, 70s brick, narrow hall, shared laundry on each floor, and a concierge at the glass door who said, "Evening," without making it a conversation. Most of the residents were middle-aged or retired, polite nodders who didn't linger. That suited me. I needed the silence to figure out who I was without a husband, without the routines I could do in my sleep. Across the corridor, directly opposite my door, lived Mr. Tomlin. Tall, rail-thin, a big voice that carried like it had practice projecting to the back row, and this habit of wearing tweed jackets even when I saw him holding his mail in slippers. He told me once, just once, not in a braggy way, that he'd taught history and that he was a widower. Tuesdays we'd collide in the laundry room, 'cause both of us believed midweek was smarter than weekend chaos. He'd catch the door with his heel and I'd thank him, and we'd do that smile that says, "I'm fine, you?" while the washers bullied the quarters. Sometimes he'd pass me his newspaper sections while we waited. He mentioned 3 adult kids, scattered like migration. 1 in Oregon, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Illinois. I didn't push for more. He didn't either. That was the rhythm of the floor, a kind of contained civility. It actually calmed me, which is weird to admit, but there it is. I learned which cart squeaked, which dryer ate socks, what time the concierge took his smoke break just outside the vestibule. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand I wasn't looking for trouble. I went to work, came home, and counted small victories. Fixed a cabinet hinge, ran a mile without stopping, said no to a family brunch I didn't want to attend. He seemed strong for a man his age. I'd see him on my way in from a run, early, taking out trash with that purposeful lean, no cane, no walker. His TV bled through the door most mornings, a news anchor's cadence at a volume that said either stubborn or hard of hearing, maybe both. We were never close, but I liked knowing there was a decent person across from me, someone who'd say, "After you," and mean it. One afternoon he was in the lobby when I came in loaded down with groceries. "Let me," he said. Not, "Can I?" And he lifted the heavy bag like it weighed nothing, and then waved off the cash I tried to press on him. "Don't insult me, Maureen," he said, chuckling at himself for sounding stern. He felt like one of those old-school gentlemen people talk about missing. Open doors, no fuss, never overstepping. If he had health problems, I didn't see them. He carried himself like a man with a schedule. Paper at 7, news at 8, laundry Tuesdays, jacket always on the hook by 5. Then that Wednesday morning, getting ready for work, office manager at a small law firm, nothing glamorous. There was this strange quiet that registered before I could name it. Usually there'd be the muffled morning show from his place, little bursts of commentary through the seam of the door as I locked mine. That day, nothing. I told myself maybe he slept in, maybe he turned it down. New remote, kids visiting, who knows. I grabbed my keys, checked my tote for the invoices I kept meaning to mail, and left it at that. By 6 that evening I was tired, and that paper-cut way office days make you tired, and the elevator floor felt sticky under my shoes. Someone spilled. A soda, I guess. And when I turned the corner, I saw his newspaper still rolled tight under his door. The New York Times lands around 7 a.m. in our building, and he always collected it before the coffee smell in the hall went stale. It was still in the plastic sleeve, edge dark with the grit the corridor fan kicks up. I stopped. It felt too obvious. I stood there with my mailbox key in my hand for a beat, thinking, okay, he went to see one of the kids. He forgot to put a hold on it. But then I heard my own voice in my head adding, "You've never seen him miss a paper." I rang his bell. 3 short presses, not leaning on it. I could hear my own wall clock through my door, tinny tick. So I knew the hall was really that silent. Nothing from inside. No shuffle. No, just a second. No TV suddenly coming up. I waited a minute, maybe a little more. The concierge's chair creaked faintly from the lobby below when someone came in. I could picture him looking toward the camera, not at me. I tried the bell again, just once. Still nothing. "Mr. Tomlin?" I said, low, closer to the doorframe so I wouldn't broadcast it to the whole floor. No answer. I looked at the paper again like it could tell me something. My fingers hovered near the knob, then I pulled my hand back. Boundaries, Maureen. Don't be the nosy neighbor. I told myself I was overthinking it. People forget stuff. Flights get delayed. Clocks get unplugged. I picked up my mail, put the firm's junk into the recycling slot, and decided not to worry. He probably left for a visit and just forgot to cancel the paper. By Thursday evening, there were 2 newspapers under his door. One jammed partly under the other, like the carrier tried twice and didn't care. And that was the point I stopped telling myself not to be dramatic. I took the stairs down to the front, straight to the desk, and told the concierge, Frank, older guy with a worn tie, that Mr. Tomlin hadn't answered his bell and hadn't picked up his mail for 2 days. He frowned, not surprised exactly, but like he had already been thinking about it. "I'll call the manager," he said, reaching for the phone, then asked me what apartment and how long I'd known him. Routine stuff. I said, 3 years. Opposite me, and added that his TV had been quiet Wednesday morning, which was unusual. Frank nodded and said, "We'll do a welfare check," and I went back up because I didn't want to hover, and I also didn't want to be the neighbor who stands there listening for gossip. Around 7, I heard sirens, the kind that don't pass. They land. I looked out the window and saw the ambulance lights throwing red across the lobby glass, 2 squad cars behind it. My stomach dropped. I knew it was about him even before anything was said. I stepped into the hallway, and there were paramedics coming out of the elevator with a folded stretcher, and 2 officers moved past me toward the laundry room at our end of the corridor. One held up a hand and told me, "Ma'am, please return to your residence." And his tone said there was a procedure, and I was in it. I went back inside and stood by the door anyway, not pressing my ear, just there. Because what else do you do? An hour later, there was a knock, measured, 2 beats, and I opened to a detective with a notebook already out. He asked my name, confirmed my unit, then said, plain and quick, that they'd found Mr. Tomlin in the 4th floor laundry room. "He's deceased," he said, and I don't know what my face did because he followed with, "We believe he's been there approximately 48 hours, possibly since Tuesday evening." He asked when I'd last seen or heard him. Did I notice anyone going in or out? Did the building have disputes? Anything unusual? I told him about the papers, the quiet morning, the 2 of us doing laundry on Tuesdays, which sounded so small coming out of my mouth. He wrote it, thanked me, and said someone might follow up. They kept the hall taped off for a while. Then they were suddenly gone, like they folded the whole thing into the stretcher and drove it away. The next hour blurred. Frank called up to say they'd be in touch with his family, that the building would send a notice, that I shouldn't worry about cleaners in the morning. And then it was quiet again, our regular hallway quiet, which felt obscene. The police explained the next day that it was a massive heart attack Tuesday evening, while he was coming down to pull clothes from a dryer. The machines on our floor face each other in 2 rows, and there's that dead corner where the last washer meets the wall and the detergent shelf sticks out. And if you fall there, you're invisible from the doorway unless you angle in. He fell into that gap. No one used the laundry room for 2 days. Tuesday and Wednesday are our dead zones. Everybody crams it in on weekends or tries to be a hero on Monday. The manager said the camera outside the laundry showed him in at 7:42 p.m., no one else after. I remembered too clearly that on Tuesday around 8, I'd heard a dull thump in the corridor. Not loud, just a heavy something connecting with tile. And I'd paused with the remote in my hand and decided somebody had dropped a bag of cans or a toolbox. We've got a contractor 2 doors down who's always hauling cases, so I didn't even open the door. I just let my show roll and made tea. When I repeated that to the detective, he just nodded and said, "He likely died almost immediately." It wouldn't have changed the outcome, and he said it like a fact, not a kindness. And then he closed his notebook. Later that night, a maintenance guy propped the laundry door and carried out a basket lined with a trash bag and a garment bag I recognized, dark tweed shoulders poking. I stayed in my unit, on my side of the peephole, and watched the hallway without really blinking. Frank slid a typed notice under the doors about an hour after. Condolences, pending contact with next of kin, services unknown. The papers kept coming until the stop took, and by then there were 4, and then none. The quiet in the mornings went back to being just quiet, which is its own kind of noise once you know what it can mean. I keep replaying that week in dumb practical pieces. 2 papers, then 3. The thump I ignored because who opens a door for a thump? The Tuesday habit that became his last errand. And I know what the detective said about timing. I know the doctor said almost instantaneous. But my brain still runs the other track where I check the hall, where I knock on the laundry door, where I'm the annoying neighbor at Frank's desk on Wednesday morning instead of Thursday night. And none of it brings him back. It just changes how long he lay alone in a room we all pretend isn't part of our homes, even though it is, 20 steps from my door. And I hate how ordinary it all was. How death can show up so quietly that a television show and a closed door are enough to cover it. When I was 20, I signed up for this bartending course because I wanted to make extra money while finishing my community college degree. The classes met 3 evenings a week at the community center downtown. Nothing fancy, just 12 people learning how to mix drinks and deal with customers. Our instructor Roger was this old-school bartender who'd worked in the industry for 30 years, knew every cocktail by heart, and taught us the real skills you need behind a bar. From day one, I noticed this woman named Valerie who always sat in the back corner and stared at me constantly. She was maybe 35, always dressed really well, expensive clothes and jewelry, and she had this intense way of looking at people that made me uncomfortable. Whenever I was practicing behind the mock bar setup, she'd come up way too close, touching my arm while supposedly correcting my technique, even though Roger hadn't asked her to help. After the 3rd class, she cornered me in the parking lot and straight up invited me to her place to practice privately. I told her I had a girlfriend and wasn't interested, but she just laughed and said that didn't matter. Roger ran the class like a shift. Stations, timed rushes, laminated order cards, and he'd clap, "Move with purpose," while we tried to keep up. That should have kept everyone busy, But Valerie didn't respect boundaries at all. She'd drift right into my space like she belonged there, fingers on my wrist while I counted 1,000, 2 1,000 for the poor. And if I stepped aside, she'd mirror me like it was a game. I asked Roger quietly if she was a TA or something. He said no, she was just enthusiastic, and to let him know if she bugged me. The next class, she leaned on the bar and asked what nights I was free, then smiled when I didn't answer. It sounds small, but the way she stood like she owned the floor made me feel pinned. I started packing up faster than everyone else. New rule for myself: leave in a group, don't walk out alone. After the third class, I thought maybe I'd imagined how bold she was, and then the parking lot thing happened. Her heels on the pavement, keys in her hand, that casual, "Come by, I've got a full bar at home, you can practice on me" line like we'd already agreed. I said no again, added the girlfriend part, and she tilted her head and said, "That's cute," like I'd told a joke. I got in my car and locked it before answering a text, which felt dumb. But I had that prickly sense you get when someone is too interested and not hearing no. I drove home with my phone face down because the whole thing made me feel watched, even though I knew she was behind me in that lot. The next week she brought me this expensive bartending tool set, like $200 worth of shakers and strainers and jiggers, claiming it was a gift because I was so talented. I refused to take it, which seemed to piss her off, but she kept insisting until I literally walked away from her. My buddy Dennis from the class pulled me aside and warned me that Valerie had been asking other students about me, where I lived, if I was single, creepy stuff like that. Then the Instagram messages started. First just compliments about my natural talent and great smile, then getting more sexual and direct. I blocked her account, but she made a new one within a day and kept messaging. When I complained to Roger, he had a talk with her, and she actually disappeared for 2 classes, which gave me hope this was over. But I should have known better, because the next week she came back acting like nothing had happened, just staring at me the whole time. Dennis joked about wearing a fake wedding ring to class, or swapping stations with me so she couldn't hover, and for one session he planted himself between us like a bouncer. She just repositioned, eyes past him, and locked on me. I kept it professional. No replies online, no small talk in person, and told Roger I wanted everything documented. He nodded and said, "You're doing the right thing," and reminded me the center had policies. That night, I got a burner-looking account DM that just said, "Blocking doesn't erase chemistry," which made my stomach drop because she was treating it like a flirtation, not a boundary. I screenshotted everything and sent it to myself, then tightened up my routine, head on a swivel leaving the center, straight to my car, no detours. Then things escalated beyond the classroom. I started seeing her places I hung out, the coffee shop where I met friends, the bus stop near my house, even outside my community college one afternoon. She never approached me, just stood at a distance watching, which was somehow worse than if she'd come up and said something. I told my mom, who's been a detective with the city police for 20 years, and she took it seriously right away. Mom contacted the community center management, filed a formal harassment complaint, and made it clear that if Valerie didn't back off, there'd be legal consequences. Valerie apologized to the center director, claimed she'd misread my signals, and would keep her distance. For a week, everything seemed calm, and I started to relax a bit. The course was almost over anyway, just 2 more weeks, including the practical exam where we'd work in a real bar. The practical was at a downtown bar that partnered with the course, and we'd each get a Friday night shift under their head bartender. My turn came and I was excited. Real customers, real tickets, time to show what I learned. About an hour in, Valerie walked in, came straight to my rail, sat in front of me, and said for nearby tables, "Finally we can spend time together in the right setting, baby." I kept working and told her to leave. She smirked, ordered a martini, and demanded I make it. I refused and waved the manager over. She shot her hand across the well, clamped my wrist, nails digging, and hissed, "I paid for this whole course just to be near you. You belong to me." That's when my mom walked in, still in uniform from a call nearby. She cut through the crowd, took in the grip on my arm and the room going quiet, flashed her badge, and said to let go. Valerie released me and switched to a bright voice about how we were just kidding, that I'd been flirting for weeks. I held up the nail marks and told Mom about the messages and the apology at the center. Mom asked the manager if the bar had cameras. He pointed to the dome above the taps. Mom stepped aside so she wasn't blocking the terminal, asked Valerie for ID. When Valerie balked, she repeated the request like it wasn't optional. Valerie slid her license over. Mom verified it, relayed it into her shoulder mic for the record, and said Valerie was being documented for harassment and stalking. The manager started a written incident report and signed it with the time. Roger came from the back, saw my wrist, and said he'd warned Valerie weeks ago, which established a pattern. Mom explained the restraining order process, and before the night ended, Valerie was served a temporary no-contact order. No coming near me, no social media, no showing up where I'm scheduled. She tried one last soft smile and called it a misunderstanding, but Mom had her sign the service acknowledgement and escorted her outside with the manager. I finished the practical on autopilot, passed, and completed the course the next week. I took a job across town at a place that scans IDs at the door and enforces a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. For a couple months it was quiet. No weird DMs, no cars idling near my block. I still saved everything, screenshots, dates, times. Then an Instagram followed me and DM'd in a college kid voice asking about bartending, but the punctuation and phrasing were the same. I didn't answer. I screenshotted it and called Mom. She compared it to the prior report, printed it, and paid Valerie another visit. Official this time. She brought the incident report, the new account printouts, and the temporary order, and said any contact, even through fake profiles, violated the order and could mean jail. She laid out the penalties: arrest, fines, licensing issues. Valerie tried to act shocked and said anyone could make a fake, but Mom filed a formal warning and requested an extension. The judge signed a 1-year order, service documented. After that, it went quiet. I settled into the new bar and kept my head on a swivel without letting it run my life. I bartend at a busy spot downtown, but I'm careful with conversation boundaries, and I keep my phone ready to document anything weird, because some people don't hear no, they only hear not yet, and I don't plan on confusing the two again. Last summer, my sister Linda and I decided to go camping for the weekend at a state national park. It was 3 hours drive from our city. We both worked in an office and wanted a break from computers and phones, and we'd been talking about it for weeks, like, we're just gonna sit by a river and do nothing. No Slack, no emails. The plan was simple: pitch a tent by the river, spend 2 days hiking through the woods, reading books, enjoying the silence. We weren't professional hikers, but we had experience. We'd been on trips like this 3 or 4 times before, enough to know what food to pack and what blisters feel like. We left early Saturday morning and got to the park around noon. We parked in the lot where the map kiosk is. From there, a trail cut down to the river, about 40 minutes. We took our backpacks and started walking. The weather was great, sunny and hot. That kind of heat that bounces off light-colored rocks. Reaching the river, we found a good spot on a small clearing about 50 yards from the water, open enough to see anyone walking in, but with brush at our backs so the wind didn't whip the tent. There weren't many people in the park. It was a weekday, most people at work. Don't ask me how it felt like that on a Saturday. It just did. Empty parking rows and quiet trails. We set up the tent, laid out our things, had lunch off the little stove. Then Linda went swimming, and I stayed to read a book in the shade of a tree. Some thriller I barely remember because I kept rereading the same paragraph. About an hour later, I got up to get water from the river for the kettle. I was walking along a narrow path by the bank when I noticed a person. A man was standing about 30 yards from me on the opposite bank, looking in my direction. Dark clothes, a cap tugged low, no backpack or fishing pole, no cooler, no towel, nothing. I waved, automatic, thinking he was just another tourist. He didn't respond, just kept standing there. I held the kettle a little stupidly, waited a second, then filled it, and went back. I told Linda, and she shrugged and said lots of people walk around. The park is big. Maybe he was waiting on someone. I agreed but felt weird about the no gear thing. Who comes to a river with nothing? By late afternoon, the light got easier, and we decided to do a short loop up the trail and back. We passed 2 older women with trekking poles and a dad with a kid on his shoulders. That was it. I kept checking behind us, and Linda teased me for acting like a hall monitor, but she didn't argue when I asked her to keep her whistle on. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand we're not reckless. We pick spots with sight lines, and we split tasks, so nobody wanders far without saying where. Back at camp, I stacked wood. Linda checked the tent lines, and we both did the basic food bag away from the tent routine because bears exist, even if you don't see them. While I was tying off the bag, I heard a crack like a foot on a dry branch from the trees behind us, and did that quick turn you do when you've convinced yourself it's a squirrel. Nothing there, just our clearing, a line of blackened fire ring stones, and the path back to the trail like a little runway. We built a fire, made dinner. Pasta with jarred sauce, not gourmet, but it fills you up. By evening it got cooler fast. We sat by the fire, chatting, looking at the stars through that cutout of branches. Linda was doing that thing where she talks about work problems and then laughs at herself for talking about work on a no-work weekend. It was about 10 o'clock when Linda suddenly said, "Look, someone's coming." I turned and saw the silhouette of a person approaching our camp from the tree line beyond the path. The way he moved wasn't rushed, just steady, like he already knew where he was going. In the firelight, I could see it was the same man I'd seen during the day. The cap, the plain dark jacket, the same empty hands. He stepped to the edge of our clearing and stopped like he'd hit an invisible fence. I stood up and said, "Good evening. Do you need something?" Trying to keep my tone level, palms open by my sides and not near the knife on the camp table because I didn't want to escalate anything. He was silent for about 10 seconds, long enough for me to hear the river in the gap. Then he asked if we knew where a specific place was. He said a name that sounded like a side trail or a campsite number, like Stone Ridge Spur or something. I didn't catch it exactly. "Sorry, we're not sure where that is," I said, and I added that the map kiosk was back up by the lot if he needed one, which was me basically saying, "You should be up there, not here." He kept smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes, and looked at us for another moment. Linda set her mug down, and I heard the little click on the enamel. He didn't ask a follow-up, didn't point, didn't look around like he was actually lost. He just turned, pivoted on his heel in this neat little half-circle, and wandered back into the woods. He didn't say anything else. I looked over at Linda, both of us equally mystified and unnerved, and we just watched the dark swallow him up like he'd been there before. After we were sure he was gone, Linda asked if that was the same person I'd seen before. I couldn't be 100% sure, but I was fairly confident it was. Same build, same cap, same nothing in his hands look. We spent the rest of that night by the fire trying to think of reasons the man would be out there like that. Maybe he'd gotten separated from friends. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he was embarrassed to admit he was lost. The only thing that made some sense was if he got desperate for help once the sun went down and was lost or something. But that man didn't seem desperate at all. He asked for directions like everything was normal, like he was practicing lines. He also wouldn't have just left after asking one question, right? If you're lost, you ask for the map, or you ask to warm up by the fire, or at least say thanks. We were both getting a little freaked out, so we let the conversation die. Linda said, "Let's lock stuff down and sleep. We can leave early if you want." And I nodded, because that was a reasonable plan. We let the fire burn out and climbed into our tent. I clipped my whistle to the lantern loop and put the little folding knife inside the mesh pocket by my head. Linda double-checked the zipper and said, half joking, "Bears and weird dudes, pick your fighter," and I told her to set her phone's flashlight within reach. Wind moved a little through the brush, but otherwise the clearing felt tight, like everything outside it had stepped back a few inches. I could still smell the pasta on the pot lid even after we sealed the food bag higher. We lay there without talking. I set an alarm for first light and told myself to sleep in 10-minute chunks, which never works but makes you feel like you're doing something. At some point, Linda's breathing steadied, and I kept counting to 60, counting again, listening for anything that wasn't river or insects. I tried to sleep, lying there for at least an hour, just listening to the sounds of the woods. There was this weird feeling I was getting that wouldn't let me close my eyes for too long without getting nervous, like when you know someone's reading over your shoulder. After somewhere around 2 hours of lying awake, I heard it, footsteps sneaking toward our tent, not heavy like an animal, just measured, heel to toe, brush parting once and then stopping. I yelled Linda's name and rushed out of my tent. My headlamp washed the clearing and the path like a tunnel, and I swung it left, right, hard in my throat, but hands steady because moving felt better than waiting. I looked into the woods. A figure was standing 10 feet from me, just to the right of the path, turned a little sideways like he'd been watching the tent door to see who came out first. A second later, they turned around and sprinted back into the woods, hidden by the darkness, and I caught the edge of the cap and the same dark jacket before the trees took him. Linda came out only in time to hear their footsteps running away, and she grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "It's the guy." She said she knew exactly what was going on. He'd come to see if 2 women alone were asleep, or if anyone else was around. That's it. No hiking, no camping, just lurking and checking. Neither of us wanted to wait for an encore. We packed up that night and waited tiredly for dawn to make our way out of those woods. We didn't do a perfect job. Shoved the tent into the car wet, left gray ash under the stones, missed a tent stake that probably still lives out there. But we moved quietly and kept lights low, pausing every few minutes to listen for branches behind us. When we got to the lot, it was still dim, only one other car parked, and the walk to the ranger station felt longer than it had any right to be. When we got to the ranger station, we reported what happened. They said there had been complaints lately about a suspicious man wandering the park without gear and scaring campers. Multiple calls over a few weekends. Nothing solid. They'd tried to find him, but unsuccessfully. We described him and gave statements, and the ranger wrote it all down and told us we'd done the right thing leaving. We never went back to that park. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't stayed awake that night. Last spring, I attended a biology conference in Berkeley, my first major academic event as an undergraduate intern from Oregon. The first morning, right after the opening session, I decided to explore the famous campus and wandered into this massive 4-story bookstore everyone kept talking about. I was browsing the science section on the second floor when I noticed something in the window reflection. a large man in a dark gray business suit standing about 15 feet behind me. When I moved to the next aisle, he moved too. I thought it was coincidence until I went up to the third floor, and there he was again. Same distance, same position. He was maybe 50, built heavy, short gray hair, leather messenger bag pressed tight against his side like he was protecting something inside. Every time I glanced at his reflection, he was looking at books, but his hands never touched them, never pulled one out. Just his eyes scanning spines while his body stayed oriented toward me. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand I didn't know anyone in Berkeley, and I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just wanted to decompress between talks, and the bookstore felt like the safest possible place. Neutral, public, staff around, exits on every floor. Still, little things piled up. When a student squeezed past me, I shifted right, and the guy shifted right too, keeping that gap like we were attached by a tape measure. He wore dark sunglasses indoors, which I only really clocked after the third coincidence, and that, more than anything, messed with my head, 'cause I couldn't confirm where his eyes were pointed. I did this dumb thing where I pretended to text while using the black screen as a mirror, and he angled with me, shoulders still turned my way. It felt planned. I tried testing it by going to the fourth floor, then back down to the second, wandering through different sections randomly. He followed every move, keeping that exact same distance like he'd measured it. I told myself maybe he was store security, or maybe he thought I was stealing. I wasn't. But he didn't have a radio or a badge, and the messenger bag looked personal. Near the stairwell, I pretended to tie my shoe, then untied and retied just to see if he'd drift. He stopped exactly 15 feet out and pretended to check his tablet, and I realized I had never seen him actually unlock it. I walked past a sales table as if I had somewhere to be, and paused at a campus events flyer. He paused too. It was like walking with a shadow that refused to touch. On the third floor, there was a reading area with study tables, and I sat down in the far corner, pulled out my laptop like I was going to work. He sat 3 tables away, opened a tablet, but I could see in the reflection of his sunglasses that he wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me. For 20 minutes, neither of us moved. This weird, silent standoff in a quiet room with 5 or 6 people scattered around. A vending machine hummed, a chair squeaked, someone coughed, nothing else. I kept planning what to say if I had to ask for help without sounding unhinged. I texted my lab mentor about the morning talks and added a throwaway, "See you later," which was really just me leaving a breadcrumb. I hated that I was even thinking like that. I started making little moves to see what he would do. Took a sip at the water fountain, shifted my chair, closed, then opened my laptop, and he mirrored the sit-still part perfectly, which somehow felt more intentional than pacing. He wanted me to know he was there without making a scene, like he'd rehearsed being non-confrontational while still being in my space. A woman near the window rustled a newspaper, looked up, and then looked back down. I bounced between I'm paranoid and I'm not wrong. Anger edged in too, because who does this? Why here? Why me? Finally, I'd had enough. I stood up, walked straight to his table, and looked him dead in the face. "Are you following me?" I kept my voice quiet, but firm. He actually flinched, like he genuinely didn't expect me to confront him. Up close, the suit looked expensive, and a little travel wrinkled. For a few seconds, he just sat there, mouth slightly open, then mumbled that I looked like his daughter, that he meant no harm. He trailed off. His hands hovered over the tablet like he needed a prop. I held his gaze and didn't blink. "Then stop," I said. He nodded too fast, slid the tablet into the bag like he was hiding a mistake, and stood. I stepped aside to give him a lane because getting in his way didn't feel smart. He smelled like cologne over airplane air. He moved to the stairwell instead of the elevator, head down, almost a shuffle. I stayed planted and counted slowly in my head. When I hit 30, I walked to the railing and looked over the atrium. I caught the gray jacket merge into the ground floor crowd near the registers, and then he exited through the glass doors. He didn't look back. I waited there longer than I want to admit, pretending to read a textbook buyback notice while keeping one eye on the entrance. A staffer asked if I needed help, and I said I was waiting for a friend and forced a smile I didn't feel. Calling the police to report a feeling felt pointless. I gave it 5 more minutes, watching for sunglasses in the stairwell window. Anything. Nothing. I spent the next few hours at the conference completely absorbed in presentations, talking to other students, meeting professors, and honestly, I forgot about the whole thing. The guy was gone, probably embarrassed, problem solved. Around 9 p.m., I left through the campus skyway and headed to the open student parking garage where I'd left my rental car. The garage sat on the edge of campus, boxed in by low academic buildings, and the lighting was terrible, half the overhead fixtures either flickering or dead. I cut down the wide concrete path between rows of cars, counting aisles to remember where I'd parked, and then I froze. 15 meters ahead, leaning against a black SUV, was the same man in the gray suit, just standing there, looking directly at me. My stomach dropped like a stone. I didn't try to play it cool. I spun around and walked fast toward the brighter section near the entrance, because light equals people and cameras and maybe a call box. Behind me, I heard heavy footsteps on concrete, getting closer, not running but long strides, confident, and I didn't wait to see how close he'd get. I broke into a half-run down my original aisle, heart hammering loud enough to feel in my neck, fumbling in my bag for my keys. I knew exactly which corner spot I'd picked earlier. Dim, near a column, great shade from the afternoon sun, terrible idea at night. And I cut between a compact sedan and a pickup to shave distance. The footsteps were closer now, maybe 30 feet, maybe less. I couldn't bring myself to look back and waste time. I yanked the key ring free so hard it snapped the tiny plastic tag from the rental counter, and it bounced off the pavement. I didn't stop to grab it. The car chirped when I hit unlock, a too loud sound that echoed, and I hated it immediately. I could hear him breathing now, or maybe that was me, but it pushed me harder. I rounded the last row and saw my car, silver, nose toward the wall, driver's side facing the dark gap between 2 pillars, and I aimed straight for it. No zigzags, no hesitation. I reached my car, yanked the door open, threw myself into the driver's seat, and hit the lock button all in one motion. The central locks thunked like a lifeline. The man stopped about 6 feet from my car and just stood there, watching me through the windshield, his face completely blank. Up close, the sunglasses were gone, and his eyes were pale, washed out, almost bored. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition, but I managed it on the second try. Turned, felt the engine catch, a relief that hit like a cough. Then I remembered the dash cam I'd installed for the rental. Cheap, suction cup mount, always a pain, and I flipped it on, saw the red light blink. I clicked the high beams and pointed them straight at him. The bright light hit him full in the face, and he raised one arm to shield his eyes, squinting but not stepping back at first, like he wanted me to see he wasn't scared. I grabbed my phone and took several photos through the windshield, making sure he saw me doing it. The shutter sounds loud and stupid but useful. I said out loud, "I have your picture," because saying it made me feel like it mattered. He stood there maybe 20 more seconds, arms still up blocking the light, and I kept the wheel turned so if he lunged I could cut hard right and scrape the column if I had to, because metal can be fixed and bones take longer. He finally shifted his stance, looked left, then right, then slowly backed away into the darkness between parked cars, not turning, just floating backward until the beams caught only his shoulder, then his hand, then nothing. I counted to 3 and didn't make it past 2. I threw the car in reverse, checked the backup camera, and peeled out of that spot, tires chirping on smooth concrete. I didn't crash into anything, which felt like luck. I cleared the exit ramp, shot past the pay station, and hit the street going 20 over the limit, hands locked at 10 and 2, checking my mirrors every 5 seconds for any shape that looked like a black SUV or gray suit or anything. Nobody followed. At a red light, I snapped 2 more photos of my own dashcam screen just in case the file corrupted, then realized the light had changed and drove the rest of the way with my jaw clenched so tight it ached. At the hotel, I parked under the floodlight near the front door, walked in with my bag and my keys in my fist like a jagged rock, and said nothing to anyone because I didn't want to start something I couldn't finish at midnight. I double-locked the room, slid the deadbolt, and pushed the desk chair under the knob on autopilot, then sat on the bed and went through the photos. They were grainy, but his face was there. I emailed them to myself, to my mentor, to my mom, to an account I never use, because redundancy felt like control. The next day, I filed a report with campus security, handed over the photos and the dash cam clip, told them the time, the aisle, the pillar number, the make of the black SUV, everything I had, and the officer wrote it all down, said they'd pull garage footage and send it to Berkeley PD, and I nodded a lot and thanked him, but I never found out if they caught him. So this happened when I was 13, about 7 years ago now, and I remember that day pretty clearly. It was summer, probably 2018, and I went with my 2 friends, Ethan and Brandon, to the big electronics store at the mall. Ethan's parents gave him $50 for his birthday, and he wanted to price out games, and me and Brandon were just tagging along because that's what we did on Saturdays when we had nowhere else to be. The store was huge with the stuff that mattered: phones, laptops, games, headphones. We passed a wall of giant TVs and headed to the gaming corner in the back. They had demo stations, so we took turns on a new shooter and tried to convince Ethan which game would stretch his 50 the best. I noticed a man about 10 steps away by the controller rack, average height, skinny, jeans, plaid button-up. Nothing special except he wasn't looking at the rack. He was watching us. Honestly, me. When our eyes met, he didn't glance away like normal people do. He smiled and gave a tiny wave like we knew each other. I figured maybe he was somebody's dad waiting for his kid, and I gave this awkward nod back. Didn't want to be rude. And my friends didn't notice. He hung around another minute, and then drifted toward headphones, and I went back to playing and forgot about him. After a few more rounds, Ethan decided he wanted to check the aisle with the figures and game merch. We cut through the main aisle, me in the back, and when I looked over my shoulder, I saw the same guy again. He was like 20 meters behind us near the smartwatches, acting like he was reading a box, but his face was pointed down our way. That pulled at my stomach because it was weird to see him again in a different section right where we went next. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to be that paranoid kid who ruins the trip over nothing. But I wanted to check. When we reached the figures aisle, I told them I was going to hit the restroom by the main entrance. Brandon said, "Hurry up, dude. They've got the rare ones locked up." And Ethan was already comparing price tags, so neither of them really looked at me. I cut across the floor. I kept my pace normal, glanced back twice, and didn't spot the guy anymore, which made me think maybe I just invented a problem. I do that sometimes when I'm bored. 2 minutes later, I came out of the restroom and decided not to go straight back. I veered toward the phone displays by the entrance and pretended to compare cameras. From there, you can see the whole middle, The circular information desk sits dead center like a little island, and I watch the aisles out of the corner of my eye like the school safety talk said to do. That's where I saw him again. He was at the information desk, standing just off-center, angled toward the figures section where I was supposed to return. He wasn't talking to the worker. He wasn't holding a brochure. He was just there, eyes fixed down that lane like he was waiting for someone to walk out. My heart did that fast thump, not panic, just a hard jolt, and I ran through dumb questions. Am I misreading this? Do I tell security? Do I tell my friends? And then what? He wasn't doing anything technically wrong. He was just in the store a lot in the exact places we were, which sounds stupid when you say it out loud. I pictured going up to the floor guy in the blue polo and saying, "Hey, there's a man looking at me," and getting the polite smile that means "kid, please." Going back to Ethan meant walking right through the lane he was watching, and that felt like the wrong move. So I waited. I experimented, I guess. He didn't act like a shopper. He didn't pick up a flyer or tap his phone. Hands in his pockets, weight shifting once, then still again, staring down the aisle. Every time a group passed, he did this tiny lean like he was checking faces as they came through. A mom with a stroller paused to ask the cashier something, and he stepped aside, then slid right back into the same spot, same angle. He hadn't glanced toward me once since I'd seen him, which weirdly made it worse, because it meant I wasn't just catching random eye contact. Why me? Did I look like someone he knew? Did I drop something? None of that made sense. It felt like he was expecting me to be the one who came out of that aisle. Now, before I explain what I did next, I'm not brave. I'm 13. I don't make big moves, but I can test things. So I stayed where I was, instead of returning to Ethan and Brandon. If I was wrong, no harm. If I was right, he'd show it. I slowed my breathing and used the black phone glass like a mirror without lifting my head. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. He stayed. He adjusted a shirt cuff, glanced toward the doors like he was checking the time without a watch, then put his eyes right back on the figures aisle and planted there, like a hunter pretending he wasn't in a blind. I took out my actual phone and typed, "Gonna be like 5 more minutes." Ethan sent back a thumbs up and a dumb sticker because that's Ethan, and I almost wrote more but stopped with my thumb hovering. Saying it out loud made it real, and also I didn't even know what it was. I didn't move. I stayed by the phones and kept watching what he would do next. He waited about a minute and then started toward the exit, not out the door, just stopping right at the glass and pretending to scroll his phone. He held it low like he wanted anyone looking to think he was bored. But every few seconds he lifted his eyes past the reflections and looked into the store dead toward the aisle where I was supposed to be. I kept my face angled at the phones like I was trying to compare prices I couldn't afford, and then I made the call I could live with. I went back to my friends. I moved steady, no sprinting, cut behind a TV display, then slid into the figures aisle and told them we should bounce because my mom wanted me home early. Total lie. Ethan shrugged and said he was ready to check out anyway. He grabbed a fighter game that was marked down to 30. Brandon joked about borrowing it first, and we headed for the registers. I made sure to put myself between them instead of trailing like usual, and out of the corner of my eye I saw him reappear inside the store, not hiding anymore, pacing parallel with us along another row like we were magnets pulling him, and he couldn't help it. We paid, the receipt printed too slow, and then we pushed through the security pylons into the mall. I glanced back and he was there at the store doorway, planted, watching us go. No pretending now. When our eyes met, he lifted his hand and gave that same little wave, like we were finishing a conversation we'd started without words. The wave froze me for a half breath, and then I felt Brandon bump my shoulder because I'd stopped walking and the crowd didn't care we were kids. I grabbed Ethan's sleeve and said, "Let's just go, like now." And he didn't argue. We moved fast down the main corridor toward the big exterior doors, not running but one notch under it. I checked glass reflections instead of turning my head like a movie taught me. Dumb, I know, but it works. And I saw the plaid shape step out of the electronics store and keep the same distance, not closing, not falling back, just steady. Brandon said his sister was picking us up at the main entrance, and I said, "Good, that's closer." And we cut around a sunglasses kiosk and a cart selling phone cases and hit the vestibule where people always clog up to text rides. We stopped at the main doors and parked ourselves near a trash can because it gave us something solid to put at our backs. Brandon texted his sister, "We're at the front," and I scanned left and right. The man didn't come all the way to the entrance. He hung back 20, maybe 30 yards, just inside the mall corridor, and leaned on a pillar like he'd suddenly remembered he had no reason to be outside. There were other people, teenagers, a security guard talking to a janitor, a family with bags, and he wasn't doing anything you could point at and say wrong. He just stood where we could see him, and he could see us. Nobody else noticed. A silver crossover pulled to the curb and honked twice, and Brandon said, "That's her." And we piled in. Me in the back behind the driver, Ethan next to me, Brandon up front. The second the door shut and the lock clicked, my shoulders dropped like I'd been holding something heavy. His sister, Sam, she's like 20, asked why we were out early, and I just said, "Crowds." And she rolled her eyes and pulled into traffic. We didn't talk for a minute. I kept my face turned just enough to see the mall slide by the window, and I didn't spot him in the glass, or the curb, or the crosswalk, which should have made me feel dumb, but didn't. Halfway to Ethan's place, I told them about the guy, how I'd first seen him by the controllers, then smartwatches, then the info desk, and then the wave. And Ethan laughed at first, like a polite one, and said, "Dude, you freak yourself out all the time." I said, "Yeah, maybe." But Brandon twisted around in his seat and stared at me and said, "What if he wanted to grab you, though? Like for real?" Sam told him to knock it off, that it wasn't funny, and we shut up again. I don't know if he actually planned something or if he was just a creep who gets off scaring kids, and I can't prove which one. But I avoided that mall for months after, and even now I can still see his hand lift at the doorway with that cold, confident smile like he knew I couldn't do anything about it. And I think too much about whether I'd have noticed if I'd gone alone, or if I would have just wandered from aisle to aisle while someone watched and waited for their moment. I was 16 when this happened, maybe 5 years ago now. My parents went out of state for a weekend to visit relatives and left me home alone for the first time. They were nervous about it, but I convinced them I'd be responsible. I did the whole good kid routine, sent them a pic of the clean kitchen, told them I'd keep the door locked, all that. Saturday night I was bored, playing video games, ate some pizza. Around 10 p.m. I was scrolling through social media and got a message from a girl named Crystal. Her profile was new, only a few photos, but she looked attractive. Same school district. I recognized the banner from our local high school's group page. She said she'd seen my picture in the group and wanted to get to know me. We started messaging back and forth. Little stuff at first, like classes and music. Then she asked what I was doing that night. I told her my parents were out. Yeah, dumb. And I was just chilling. She replied with a laughing emoji and said something like, "Lucky, my folks are the opposite." The conversation kept moving fast. Lots of short messages, a couple of selfies from her bathroom mirror that looked real but also not overly staged. I noticed the account had like 3 friends and no tagged pics, which was weird. But I told myself maybe she was just the type to keep things private. Why would I question it? After about an hour, Crystal was getting flirty and suggested meeting up. I was flattered by the attention, and the house was empty. When she asked for my address, I gave it without thinking twice. I know. She said she lived nearby, and could come over right now. I agreed, even though a voice in my head said this was weird. A girl I'd never met wanting to come to a stranger's house after midnight. I ignored that voice, told myself this is how older guys talk about shoot your shot, and waited, pacing around the living room nervously. I moved the pizza box to the trash, kicked a sock under the couch, did a quick smell check of myself like an idiot. Now, before I explain what happened next, you need to understand we live on a quiet street with one sodium street lamp out front that always hums, so you can see silhouettes but not faces from the window. Around 11:30 there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, Crystal, smiling, wearing a short jacket and jeans. Same girl from the selfies, or close enough that my brain said yes. She asked if she could come in and walked past me before I answered, like she'd done this 100 times. I closed the door and locked it out of habit. She said my house smelled like cologne and pizza, and laughed. Once inside, she asked to use the bathroom. I showed her where it was, and went back to the living room. I felt weird standing there doing nothing, so I picked up my phone and then set it down again. While waiting, I looked out the window at the street. A dark sedan was parked at the curb, no dome light, engine may be off, hard to tell under the hum of the street lamp. In the dim light, I could make out another person sitting in the driver's seat. That seemed odd. Maybe it was her friend who drove her? Maybe they were waiting to make sure she was safe. I tried to rationalize it. People do that, right? A ride, a quick check-in, all good. 10 minutes passed and Crystal still hadn't come out of the bathroom. I was starting to feel anxious. The house wasn't big. You could hear the pipes when someone washed their hands. Nothing. I walked closer and heard her speaking quietly on the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but her tone was businesslike, not friendly like she'd been with me. Then I heard a sound from the backyard, like someone climbing over the fence. The neighbor's dog started barking, not that lazy half-bark either, the sharp kind that kicks you in the spine. I went straight to the kitchen window and tilted the blind with 2 fingers, and saw a figure in dark clothing cutting across our yard toward the back door, head down, moving like they already knew the path. Panic hit me hard and stupid, and I almost yelled, but I swallowed it and walked fast to the hallway, kept my steps light on the laminate because I didn't want whoever was out there to hear where I was. I went back to the bathroom door and told Crystal loudly that she needed to leave right now, like I was making a point for someone else to hear too. She opened up and stepped out looking calm, too calm, like she was clocking out of a shift. She asked if everything was okay, just that normal voice. And I lied and said my mom was about to come home so she had to go. And I made the lie bigger on purpose, told her my mom texted that she was almost here. She gave me a strange look, not confused, more like measuring. Then she nodded once and walked to the front door without arguing. I followed right on her shoulder to the threshold with the porch light off, opened it, and held it while she stepped out, and I kept my body in the frame so nobody outside could see in past me. I locked everything behind her the second she cleared the mat. Deadbolt, handle, chain, 3 quick clicks. Through the front window edge, I watched her go down the walkway quick, turn her head toward the side of the house like she was signaling something, then get in the dark sedan. It idled, pulled away slow like a patrol car trying not to look suspicious, and rolled to the corner before speeding up and disappearing under the dead street lamp at the end of the block. My hands were shaking. I didn't stand still. I went room to room in a loop and checked every lock, every window latch, even the garage door bolt and the little slider on the back door that keeps it from being lifted, and I kept the lights off so I could see out better if someone tried anything. I waited in the living room chair with my phone unlocked and one thumb over the call button, and I didn't sleep, and I watched the backyard through the narrow gap between the curtain edges until it got lighter. In the morning, I found a phone on the bathroom counter. Crystal had left it behind, screen down like a coaster. And that detail made my stomach drop in a different way because leaving a phone is either a mistake or a leash. I turned it on, and it opened to messages without a passcode. Dumb or planned, I couldn't tell. And at the top was a group chat. No names, just numbers with area codes near ours. The texts were fragments. Target confirmed. Then a pin of my street. Then, approach from rear. And a minute later, ready? And a thumbs up emoji from another number. And that sequence told me enough. I powered it off fast, and wrapped it in a paper towel and took it outside to the bin by the curb. Dropped it under coffee grounds in a pizza box. Then I went back inside, and called my friend to come stay with me. No details on the phone. Just, "Can you come crash here now? I'll explain." He came over 30 minutes later with his hoodie up and a baseball bat from his trunk, like a joke that wasn't a joke. The crystal profile disappeared from social media the next day. I searched the name and it was gone like it never existed, and the 3 mutuals were gone too. I never told my parents what happened because I knew how stupid I'd been, and because the house was fine when they came back, and because I could fix the one thing I broke. My sense that nobody watches these quiet streets. Looking back, I think they were planning to rob the house. Maybe worse, because the pattern fits, and the timing lines up, and the group chat said the quiet part out loud. The girl was bait to get inside and unlock doors, while her accomplice came through the back, or to stall me at the front, while someone else tested the slider. And the only reason it didn't go that way is because the neighbor's dogs barked at the exact minute, and I looked out the window at the right moment, and I pushed her out with that lie about my mom. And if any of those tiny things didn't happen, if I'd tried to be smooth instead of blunt, I think the back door would have clicked, and that's all it takes. One click.